You're listening to the winning literary show, Off the Shelf Books Talk Radio, live with host Denise Turney, author of the books Long Walk Up, Portia, Love Pour Over Me, Spiral, Love Has Many Faces, and Rosetta's Great Hope. Turn up your dial and get ready for a blast of feature author interviews, 411 on book festivals, writing conferences, and so much more. Ready? Let's go.
Each day provides its own gifts. That quote is from Marcus Aurelius. Each day provides its own gifts. I want to say thank you to our loyal listeners who have been with us for over 16 years here on the air, and to our loyal and new listeners, I welcome you to our Saturday, November the 2nd, 2024 show. Thank you so much for joining us. We have an insightful and talented author on deck for you today, and excited to introduce you to our guest in just a moment. But before I do, we're coming to this is autumn. You see the change. Depending on where you live, you may or may not see as much of this, but the change in the just the seasonal change. The tree outside my living room is changing colors, taking on that orange, red, brown hue, the leaves, and then pretty soon the leaves will be crunching underfoot. I just love this time of year, and this is a wonderful time. People are going to start, as it gets colder and temperatures drop, staying indoors more, and what better time to curl up with a good book. And if you love a romance, and you value relationships, not just a romantic relationship, but there's a complicated father-son relationship in this story. And also, you get to see these five guy friends that meet at college, and they are friends for a lifetime. But one of them is linked to a murder mystery. So there's a mystery in the story, there's a friendship, and there is an amazing love story in this book. And the title of the book is Love Pour Over Me. You can get it in ebook or print. If you don't sit on the shelf, just ask the clerk, library, bookstore, etc., that you would like to get a copy of Love Pour Over Me by Denise Turney, and they can order you a copy because it's carried by the largest book distributors in the world. So go get a copy of Love Pour Over Me and let me know how you enjoyed that story. And now let us go and meet today's special off-the-shelf guest. And this morning on deck, off the shelf, is Mark Stevens. And he grew up with parents who worked as librarians. Oh, my gosh. Then when I was a kid, I used to want to be a librarian. And talk about being lucky. If you love stories, your parents were librarians. He was raised in Lincoln, Massachusetts. Mark has worked in media as a reporter and television news producer. He also hosts the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers podcast and has served as president of the Rocky Mountain chapter for Mystery Writers of America. Books Mark has written and published include The Fireballer, Antler Dust, Buried by the Roan, Trapline, Lake of Fire, and The Melancholy Howl. In addition, Mark also writes short stories. I encourage you to check Mark out online. You can even go over there now as you listen to today's show and learn more about him, what inspired him to become a writer, and more about the makings of his books. You can check him out online at writermarkstevens.com. It's WRITERMARKSTEVENS.com. Again, it's WRITERMARKSTEVENS.com. We are absolutely honored to have Mark here with us this morning. Welcome to Off the Shelf, Mark.
Well, thanks a million for having me on, Denise. What a fabulous introduction. Thank you.
Oh, excited. Every guest of over 16 years, I can go back to when I first started. We were on a real radio show. It was Rainbow Soul out of New York. And I can remember those early shows. And I used to just go right into the questions about their books. And then I got emails from listeners say, no, we want to know a little bit more about your guests before you start asking about their books. So the first few questions I ask every guest to give them, our listeners, a little back story on our guests. But, oh, my gosh, we have had New York Times best-selling authors. We have had actresses. We have had movie producers. We have had so many people come on here. people with $1 million small businesses who wrote a book. It's just amazing. So you are joining a distinguished list of guests here at Off the Shelf. And so to kick off this morning's show, Mark, would you please tell our listeners where you grew up and what life was like for you growing up?
Well, I grew up in Lincoln, Massachusetts, as you mentioned, and I grew up in a very cool household in my mind. The fact that I grew up with two librarians as parents, I mean, I would wish that on every single, student, child, anybody growing up out there, to grow up in a world of folks who are curious, folks who are always looking to find out something new, folks who really just paid attention to information in general. My mother in particular really paid attention to the news, and that gave me a real interest in both watching TV news and starting to read the newspaper. Even as a 8th grader, I knew from an early age I wanted to be a reporter. I just thought it would be so cool to be one of the – I'd turn on Huntley Brinkley. That will give you an idea of how old I am, but I turn on Huntley Brinkley on NBC and just see all these reporters around the world, and I thought, man, what a job. So, I mean, I grew up in a very nice, beautiful suburb of Boston, very fortunate upbringing in a lot of ways, but I would say the main thing was to be surrounded by folks who just believed in information, believed in kind of, stimulating their lives by continuing to learn.
Did you have any siblings, or are you the only child?
I had an older brother and a younger brother. For some reason, I was the one who really got the reading and writing bug. I was the one who, for some reason, really took to the news and, worked on my high school newspaper, worked on my college newspaper. I had a job with a good newspaper right out of college. How can you explain why one sibling versus another takes to certain things? But I don't know. I just really thought that there was a lot going on out there in the world, and I wanted to go see it. I wanted to go, sort of be one of the observers of these events and get to know sort of how the world worked. And I don't know.
And I was going to ask you next, but you already told us the answer. I was going to ask you, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? And you wanted to be a reporter. So did you want to be, because we're in an age now with technology and AI, et cetera, and it's nothing, it's just going to steam forward. And we're just going to go into more changes that we don't even see now that are coming. But did you want to be like a newspaper, print journalist, newspaper, magazine, or did you want to be one of those people traveling to different parts of the world, and you're more of a television, like a journalist, whether you're covering the stories live on the ground? What type of a reporter did you want to be when you were a kid?
Yeah, it was all about print at first. It was definitely print. I loved the whole aspect of doing interviews and coming back to a newsroom and writing things up and trying to put them together in a clear, interesting way. And so it was all print for about 8 years. I worked for a newspaper in Boston, the Christian Science Monitor. I got transferred to Los Angeles, a couple of years there. I tried to get on at the LA Times, but the LA Times said, you need some more big city experience. I covered lots of different kinds of stories, but the LA Times said, you really need to get your kind of day-to-day grind going. You have sort of the whole approach I had there at the Monitor was just to write a few stories a week, and they wanted more of a high volume, really steady, somebody who could crank out a couple or 3 stories a day. And so I got on at the Rocky Mountain News in Denver and spent a few years there, enjoying covering City Hall for the Rocky Mountain News. And really just, what's interesting to me is, as a kid, I knew I wanted to be a reporter, and as soon as I was a reporter, I just felt like that was where I belonged. So there was a good feeling that my career wish was exactly what I felt like my skills actually were pretty good at. But along came a opportunity to go work for, this is back in the 1980s, go work for the McNeil Air Report. which was then a half-hour talk show on PBS, but they were expanding to what became the NewsHour on PBS. And I was part of a couple of people who interviewed for a job as a television producer in Denver. They were looking to add a Denver-based television production sort of office to go around the country, and it ended up not only going around the country but Latin America and producing news documentaries for what became the McNeil-era NewsHour. So again, I just felt like this is a great opportunity to take my reporting talents and just learn about another medium. Spent 6 years there, realized some pros and cons of the television news business, and then ended up actually it's kind of related to fiction and kind of not, because I had started to write fiction. I had some success getting an agent at the end of about 6 years of working on a book, and because I got an agent, I actually quit my job at McNeil-era, spent another year writing fiction, and then when the money ran out, ended up going back to print journalism at the Denver Post. So kind of a little bit of print, a lot of print, I would say, and then the 6 years of television news. But to me, it was all journalism and all telling stories. Yeah.
It all seems, you or another guest, and I guess all the guests, when I think of it, and everybody, your life unfolds, even if you don't think it's going to. It just does. It's like a mystery that you sometimes look up and go, how did I get here? Because when you were maybe a teenager, you never saw yourself where you'd be when you were in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, or 60s, or 70s. You're like, how did I get here? It just, one thing, just like you said, it just kind of connects. Now, who or what inspired your love for actually writing books? Because that's a bit of a shift from reporting.
Yep, totally. I really grew up reading fiction. I always loved stories and storytelling. I loved books as a kid. My mother was a very serious reader. She loved really kind of heavy literature, I guess I would call it. And she would just come home with an armful of books every week and from the library. And she didn't spend time watching television. She read every night. And I picked up the reading bug, but I never thought I would even consider writing a book. I thought this was just some sort of magical thing out there until a friend handed me a mystery, my first crime fiction when I was in my early 20s. And the whole genre kind of just seemed much more appealing to me than just quote-unquote regular literature, regular fiction, because mysteries had a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear end. And there was something very satisfying about the mystery genre. And I thought, this seems like maybe something I could take a shot at, so to speak. And, I came up with an idea. And as I said, that first book took about 6 years to write. But I got an agent, and I thought, wow, this is doable. And it was encouraging, and it was a good New York agency that still exists to this day. And I actually ended up in New York at a meeting and walked into this, literary agent's office with these giant, 20-foot doors and this old wood kind of feeling to it. And I totally felt like an imposter and totally felt like a pretender, like I didn't belong. But they said, we like this book. We like this manuscript. We'll definitely try to sell it for you. And in the end, they couldn't. And in the end, that was the beginning of 3 different agents I had with 3 different projects that all were unsuccessful in terms of finding a publisher. But I had so much encouragement from established literary folks that I just kept at it. And also in the meantime, started to find my community, my writing community in Colorado. So, and they were also encouraging, and I just kept at it. So.
Let me ask you this. So I'm listening to you because I've been at this for a minute as well. It's changed so much, just everything near everything here in this world has. But you used to, years ago, like a lot of the big publishing houses started out maybe 2 people sitting at a kitchen table, like a lot of major firms started out, somebody in a garage, somebody sitting at their kitchen table. And the several big firms, some of the founders that I've met, when they tell you how it started, it would be astounding to see where the companies have gone. But so anyway, a lot of big publishing houses started out just a few people building it out,
right.
And it just grew. They grew. So years ago, you could go directly to a publisher or an editor and sell a book, and then there came a period where it was like, no, they told you had to have a literary agent, and then, you got to get the fee for the literary agent for almost all your work. They're going to get a cut of, depending on how that contract's designed. And then, now you need a publicist, so the publicist can get the attention of the literary agent, and the literary agent gets in touch with the editor and the publisher. Now a lot of people are either going hybrid and they're self-published, but would you say to somebody listening to Off the Shelf right now who would love to be in your shoes, you have a published book, they may not, you have several published, somebody who wants to be in your shoes, would you recommend that they get a literary agent, or how would you suggest they approach getting a book published today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about this question all the time. And I have lots and lots of friends who they look at what it takes these days to, first of all, get an agent, and second of all, get a publisher. And then, of course, the ultimate thing is to get a publisher who is going to turn your book into a big hit. But they look at that whole long course and they say, boy, that's going to take a lot of years. And then they just quickly look at what is possible is to quickly, and could be 6 months, it could be a year, come up with a plan to publish your book. And that means independently just produce it, because all the tools are out there. And I am kind of a unicorn, or somebody out there who's just going to say, I really, really encourage up-and-coming writers to think about the long game, think about the long term. And the reason I think that, and of course this is kind of, I fully believe in everybody's right to choose for themselves, and that's the beauty of having independent publishing today, is because if you've got a story to tell and you believe in that story, you can get it out there, and you can sell gobs and gobs of copies. You can outsell me and all my traditionally published friends. If you have a great story, it will take off if you know how to get it out there and market it. And I have friends who've been independently publishing books for years, and they've sold way more books than I have. But I really like traditional publishing, and I'm going to plant a stake in the ground for it, because if you get a good literary agent, they're really going to help you with your novel. The good literary agents to me are the one I've got, gives me tremendous feedback on my books and how to improve them. He's a great reader. He's a very sharp reader, and he gives me feedback. Then they go to the editors. Once you find a publisher, the process that you're going to go through to improve that book is just, if it's a good publisher, a legitimate, well-known publisher, you're going to go through a real process that will just up the quality of the storytelling and up the quality of the writing. I just love that whole business of going through that process. It's eye-opening, and I think independent publishing is fine, but it's full of shortcuts which don't demand that you apply really high editing standards and really high writing standards to what you're putting out there. And that's why, to me, so many books only sell a few copies.
Good point. You make a good point there. And there are a lot out here in a traditional publisher. They don't always do this. A lot of times they do it only with the big names, but they can put some dollars behind your books. But regardless of how you do it, there's no crystal ball that just because you came out with a book, even if you put a lot of work into it, that it's gonna sell. But yeah, the quality could definitely be higher. That's a great point. Now let's talk about your book specifically. Please give Off the Shelf listeners an overview of The Fireballer.
Yeah, my most recent book came out just coming up on 2 years ago in January of 2023, and The Fireballer is my first non-crime fiction. It's a book set in the world of professional baseball. It's about a rookie pitcher with the Baltimore Orioles, and he is a phenomenon because he is the talk of the country because of his ability to pitch. He can pitch he can throw a fastball. For those baseball fans out there, they already know that today's pitchers can top 100 miles an hour. The record is 106 miles an hour by a professional baseball pitcher, and at that speed, a batter has 0.3 seconds to decide whether to swing, how to swing, where to swing. It's one of the most incredible athletic talents. If you're a good hitter in the major leagues, to be able to swing a bat in 0.3 seconds, even at 100 miles an hour, you might have an extra tenth of a second, but it's an incredible response that a whole human athlete has to decide how to swing, where to swing, all that kind of stuff. It's a really incredible thing. My pitcher in my book can throw occasionally at 110 miles an hour. So it's looking ahead a little bit in the sport if in fact they ever get there. But at 110 miles an hour, the game is existentially gone. There's no time left for a batter to swing. So he's creating this existential threat to the game. The human part of it, the heavy thing he's carrying around, though, and his name is Frank Ryder, and he's again the talk of the country. The heavy thing he's carrying around, though, is that as a 12-year-old in Little League, where he played outside Atlanta on the Little League team, one of his pitches got away from him, and I'll just leave it that there was a very tragic situation that happened. So he's carrying this heavy burden around with him, knowing that the very thing that is bringing him fame and attention and conversation and controversy is the very thing that can be very, very damaging as well, because obviously, yeah. So that's the burden he's been given.
Wow. Can you describe Frank Ryder in a little more detail beyond this event with the pitching? What is he like? His family background, and what even aside from baseball, what drives him?
Yeah, great question. So he is driven by this. He was driven even as a youth by just a pure fixation and fascination with baseball. He just really got into the whole mental aspect of understanding the game and appreciating it. He grew up outside Atlanta, as I mentioned. He grew up with a twin brother, and his brother was the catcher on the day of the tragedy. His parents are both in education. They're thoughtful, smart, upbeat people, and when this tragedy happens, they realize that they need to probably move away from Atlanta so that Frank is not burdened by being around classmates who know what happened that day and the rumors and talk. So they moved to Colorado. And in fact, the parents forbid Frank from playing baseball or playing team sports through high school. He can do solo sports. He can do track and field or whatever he wants to do, but he can't do anything in terms of baseball. And one day, watching his high school baseball team play, he does something that gives away his talents. I'll just kind of leave it at that. But suddenly he is scooped up by the high school team for his last year, and then he goes to Metro State, which is a pretty well-known community college in Denver. It's actually no longer a community college. It's more like a university, but it's called Metro State University now in downtown Denver. That's an actual school. Well, the other sort of just elements to throw in there that he's got a long-time high school sweetheart girlfriend who remains his girlfriend as he gets drafted by the Baltimore Orioles, and as he moves to Baltimore, he's still in touch with his girlfriend back in Denver. And at the same time, once he finds himself in Baltimore as a very young athlete, but well paid because he's been the number one draft pick in the country, he gets a huge contract. He's also very much alone. So he finds himself in a strange city, not knowing anybody, all this pressure, and he just has to figure out how his life is going to go. And without giving away too much, I can just say that the book really pivots on a key point once he's on the Orioles. Of course, the last thing in the world that this pitcher, this individual would want to do is hurt another player, another opposing batter, because he's seen the damage that one of his baseball pitches can inflict. But in baseball, if you know, there's an unwritten rule that if one of your players gets hit, the opposing pitcher has to go out there and it's nobody. I mean, people talk about it all the time, but it's an unwritten rule that you have to retaliate. You have to throw. You have to throw at another batter, and people lie to the camera and say, "No, I wasn't trying to hit him. The ball just got away." But that's just part of the unwritten rule of baseball. So the last thing he wants to do is hurt somebody, and I'll just put in a dot.
Wow, it
right
sounds like
there.
an instant. Oh my God, it's a story that's coming full circle. That's the way it's coming across to me. Before we talk about, I want to next talk about your latest novel, and then I want to go into your mystery series. But can you introduce us quickly to a few other major and minor characters in the book, The Fireballer?
Well, yeah, sure. I also tell the story not only from Frank's point of view, but I also tell the story from the owner's point of view, a guy named Ray Gallo. And one of the things I really wanted to explore in the book is the issue of team owners who sort of let their franchises languish, who don't seem as compelled to win. I mean, you've got the New York Yankees, you've got the LA Dodgers. Those franchises and others, many others like them, always seem competitive, always seem like they want to win. And there's franchises in all the major sports where there's just everything other than winning. That's all that matters is winning. And meanwhile, there are these other franchises, like for years the Baltimore Orioles were languishing. The Colorado Rockies are continuing to just not put a winning team on the field for years and years and years. Why is that? How can you be an owner who doesn't want to invest in your own team and do the one thing you're asked to do in sports, which is win? So I wanted to get into a situation or get into a character's head, and Ray Gallo, the owner, is the other major character in the book, as he sees this phenomenon, this pitcher arrive on his team and shake up everything about what he believes. And he's challenging the whole organization, Frank is, to say, we're here to win, let's win. And in fact, the ability that Frank brings immediately in their first year brings the Orioles up into the World Series. So Ray is the other major character. Of course, we got Ray's girlfriend, Maggie. We see a lot of interaction between Frank and Maggie, a lot of it on the phone. And then also there's a brand new potential love interest in Baltimore. She happens to pitch for she happens to pitch for the community college team in Baltimore, and her name is Olivia, and she becomes a real temptation for Frank and gets him into a little bit of trouble. I'll just kind of leave it at that with his major relationship with Maggie, and helps him understand and appreciate what he's really got with his girlfriend back in Colorado.
Oh my gosh! Sounds like The Fireballer. Oh my goodness! And you know what? You would have to. The description is one of the things I love about Off the Shelf. When authors talk more in depth about their stories sound so incredibly interesting. And it's not something you could put in a book, the front cover or the back flap or the description on a book site. You have to hear the author talk about the makings of their story. Now, what is the title of your most recent book? You said it came out in 2023. And then I want to talk about the Allison Cole mystery series. But what's the title of your most recent book?
Well, I've got a book coming out next April. It's the first of a thriller series, and that just got announced this summer. It's called No Lie Lasts Forever. and that will be out in April. And it's set in Denver, and I'd be glad to tell you a little bit about that, or I can tell you about
go ahead and tell us. Then we're going to dive into the Allison Cole series.
Okay. Well, I'll just give you the basic setup for No Lie Lasts Forever. There's two main characters, and it takes a second to explain, but one is a female television news reporter, and she is senior. She's been around for a few years. She is probably 20 years into her career, and she gets involved in a situation one day where she is negotiating between the police and a hostage taker in a convenience store situation where this hostage taker has taken some hostages and he's demanding certain things, and he has asked for her, this reporter, her name is Flynn Martin, to be the negotiator in between what he wants to tell the police what he wants. Well, she's on live TV. She thinks she knows how to handle this situation. She's being told by the police what to do and how to handle it, but she thinks she can do a better job with her own instincts. Well, she her approach leads to one of the hostages getting killed, and in fact, the hostage taker then is taken out. So her station puts her out for a few days. They put her out they put her out indefinitely, and say, you know, that was just not the way you go about this business. When the police are telling you what to do, you need to do it. So she is put out. She's on suspension. So hold that thought for a second. Meanwhile, we see a brand new murder happen. And the murder happens, it's been 15 years since the serial killer was active in Denver, and all of a sudden, 15 years later, we have a brand new victim whose whole murder scene is exactly the way the old serial killer, who was never caught, used to leave his crime scenes. And we start following the retired, quote-unquote, retired serial killer, who is very, very concerned because he did not commit this latest crime. He knows, of course he knows he didn't do it, but it's done exactly the way he used to do it. So he needs to clear his name. He doesn't want this new murder attached to him, nor does he want the cops to go back in investigating all the old serial killing cases, because that might lead yet again to his doorstep. So he contacts the ousted, the defrocked television reporter who is out on the sidelines and says, I can get you your job back, and you can get my name back. You can clear my name. And, of course, she doesn't believe it's him. There's no way that this guy, whoever it is contacting her, can possibly be the retired serial or the missing, the uncaught serial killer after all these years. And so she spends the first third of the book basically saying there's no way it's you, and he figures out a very, very creative way to prove to her that it's him. And once he establishes that connection, they start working together to figuring out who actually committed the latest murder.
Wow. Oh, my God, I can see readers now. Why would she even work with this dude? Why don't you just turn him in? It's good. The conflict there, you know, the reader, that's conflict in her story is good. She doesn't know. He establishes enough trust so he can get her information, but she still doesn't know exactly who he is. So he's hiding behind all sorts of anonymous ways to reach her and contact her, and he absolutely scares the bejesus out of her. So, and he's got leverage over her too. So, No Lie Lasts Forever. Due out this spring of 2025. No Lie Lasts Forever by Mark Stevens. Look for it. Look out for that one, you guys. Now, we want to talk next about the Allison Cole Mystery Series. And is this your first series? And can you tell us what the inspiration behind this mystery series was? Sure. Yeah.
got 5 books out in the Allison Coyle Mystery Series. They started coming out in 2007. And the inspiration was just a very, very clear, magical, kind of galvanizing day in the, quite a while ago now, but I had written a couple of crime fiction books. They were standalones. They were kind of urban jungle books in terms of just being cities and, typical urban crime novels that we all love because a lot of mayhem happens in the cities, and that's where, so many classic crime books take place. And I had never really considered doing sort of outdoor anything in terms of something environmental or anything like that. And one day my wife and I were on a day-long horseback ride in the place called the Flat Tops Wilderness in western Colorado. It's the second largest wilderness area in Colorado, absolutely beautiful, remote, stunning place. And we were led by this young woman. A lot of horseback rides, and if you've ever taken a horseback ride out west, you kind of more typically get some grizzled old guy who doesn't really say much all day and expects you to know how to ride. And, they've done this ride with a bunch of vacationers or tourists hundreds and hundreds of times, and they're just sort of jaded. Well, that day we had the opposite. We had a young, vivacious, articulate, upbeat woman who knew every bit of her environment. She knew every plant. She knew every tree. She knew all the geology. She knew the cloud formations. She had all the scientific terms. And she was taking care of about 10 of us on horseback, just like it was walking down the street, super easy, for her to do. And she was tiny and just ebullient, I would say, bubbly. And about halfway through the day, as I'm talking to her, and being an old reporter, of course, I ask a million questions, and my wife kind of gets, rolls her eyes because I'm always pestering people with, But, she kind of casually mentioned that she was also a hunting guide when the fall season came around. And it was just one of those moments I just thought, wow, a hunting guide as a major character for a mystery novel would be interesting because, they're usually taking men up in the woods. They're around guns. The guns are already there. You've got extreme conditions because once the hunting season starts, it's usually snowing and definitely cold. And there's just rugged mountains to get around and rugged back country terrain to navigate. And I thought, that'd be an interesting character and would create some interesting themes to get into. And this is before, I started writing Allison Coyle books in the 90s, so a long time ago, and it didn't come out until 2007, but this is before C.J. Box, it was before Craig Johnson started publishing. It wasn't after people like Tony Hillerman or anything like that. There have been plenty of outdoorsy kinds of mysteries long before I started writing, so I wasn't doing anything that unusual, but there's a whole group of and tons of writers out there now who do write very environmental kind of mysteries set in outdoor spaces. So I wrote my first book in that series. It did get a good New York agent, as I mentioned earlier on, a really good New York agent. We spent about a year working on it. Ultimately, it didn't sell, but I found a small-ish publisher outside Boulder in 2007, and he loved the book, and he printed up 2,000 hardbacks, which was scary to me to think about how I was going to sell those, but I got in my car and started doing bookstore tours all over the state and Wyoming and poking around. And then that book did so well that I thought, well, I'm going to write another one. And I could go into each of the 5 stories, but ultimately just watched Allison Coyle kind of mature and start to become a series character. So,
yep.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that back on the what you shared about how that the story came to be, the Allison Cole. So if you could tell us how old Allison Cole is, what she's like, and then also give us a brief synopsis of Antler Dust.
Sure. Well, the main character thing with Allison Coyle is, and she's in her mid-30s, is that she is a survivor of a commercial airplane crash. As a longtime reporter and somebody who covered a lot of disasters, I covered earthquakes in Mexico City that killed tens of thousands. I've covered earthquakes in El Salvador. I've covered volcanoes in Colombia. I've covered mudslides in Puerto Rico. I've covered wildfires and all sorts of things. I developed a fascination with random death. Sounds kind of a strange, morbid thing to think about, but when the plane that went down in Iowa on its way from Denver to Chicago years ago, and actually turned into a movie called Fearless. Just this whole idea that a plane crashes in a cornfield and some people don't make it and some people do. This is a huge source of interest for me, or intrigue, and how you go about your life afterwards. So I thought, I'm going to put a character on the page who has survived. And the reason she's into flat tops is because she found a healing spot for her. This is her calm space to be. She's never going back to the big city. And she developed these skills as a hunting guide on her own. So that creates to me a little character. She so appreciates the flat tops and wants to become kind of its protector, its backwoods sheriff, in other words, that she doesn't want the big city mayhem coming up into her precious land. Well, Antler Dust basically is built around two themes. One is big game poaching, which is the whole idea of rigged hunts. These are hunts that people pay money for, where the prey are basically pre-planned in terms of where they are, and they're tracked by radio collar, so it's easier for those folks to then come in and kill big game. So Allison basically gets, she sees something through a big snowstorm at the beginning of Antler Dust, and she sees, hears a gunshot, she sees something, she's not sure what it is, and that just puts her on a trail. When a fellow hunting guide goes missing, she's put on this trail of trying to figure out what's going on. So that's the main theme in Antler Dust, and each of the books takes on kind of an environmental theme. Buried by the Roan is the second book, and that touched on fracking, which in 2011 when it came out it was being discussed in the Colorado community, but I think it was sort of on the leading edge of having fracking as a element in a mystery novel back then. And then Trapline dealt with illegal immigration and for-profit prisons, which sounds like how do you deal with that issue up in the woods? But I found a way, and Trapline went on to win the Colorado Book Award for Best Mystery, so I think I did a okay job.
Okay.
And then Lake of Fire, and then just on and on, different environmental and kind of social issues in all the books.
Awesome. Now, I wanted to ask you just a little bit going back. Just for our listeners who are maybe interested in getting each book in the series, what is going on in Allison Cole's life at the start of Buried by the Roan? For some reason, I don't know why I'm having a hard time visualizing her, but what's going on? Is she so outdoors? Does she have like real close friends, tight relationships, or is she more just outdoors with the animals and nature type of person?
She definitely has a community. She's got a good friend. Her name is Trudy, who is a health food nut and starting to develop her health food business in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, as Buried by the Roan gets going. Trudy is somebody she rescued from rescued is too strong a word, but Trudy get out of a really, really bad marriage in the first book, And Allison and Trudy become super close friends through the entire rest of the series. And Allison's boyfriend in book 1, without giving too much away, isn't around in book 2, and Allison starts to take an interest in another hunting guide and starts to develop the relationship there, and a guy named Colin. And there's just this small community. I would say Allison is pretty much a loner. She's still dealing with this commercial airplane crash, and takes a lot to trust her or to get her into a situation where she can really trust anything. She prefers to be alone, enjoys being alone. But she and Trudy are very close, and slowly but surely, Colin, I'd say book 2 kind of brings them together, and then Colin and Allison are very much together in book 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, now.
So, yeah.
At the beginning of the series, does she kind of stumble into this detective type of work, or is this something that just comes into her life? Is she become more so of a detective type as the books progress?
Great question. And that's always the kind of conceit with amateur detectives and mystery series, because, there's this real life aspect of how do you become somebody who just learns to ride a horse one day and then suddenly you're solving or helping solve murder mysteries the next in book after book. And, it goes back to the whole thing about why we like mystery series. For Allison, she stumbled into it. She became good at, and she realized she was good at, her tracking was excellent. Her ability to decode a situation or figure out a scene and understand who had been there. Her senses are good for that. We kind of, as readers, I think, and I hope as a writer, I'm just sort of hoping readers accept the fact that she's talents from book to book, and we care more about sort of the issues she's getting into, and we care about, of course, how she's going to solve the next case as it comes along. And, of course, you try to keep it somewhat plausible in terms of, how they're working with the police and the police authorities, and they're not necessarily leading the charge on every single case, but they're maybe the major players who bring folks to justice. And, because they are so familiar with Allison, she's so familiar with the backcountry and how to get around and spot where people have been, that she's a huge help to the small town police who surround the Flat Tops Wilderness.
Now, do all of them take place in Colorado in a similar location? And if so, why did you choose this particular setting?
Yeah, they do all take place in the Flat Tops Wilderness and the towns nearby, like Glenwood Springs, Rifle, Meeker, Yampa are the major towns that kind of surround the Flat Tops. And the reason I chose it is because, first of all, I didn't know of anybody else writing mysteries in that area. Secondly, I happen to love the Flat Tops. There's something absolutely serene and beautiful about it, and I wanted to kind of share that through the printed page with the whole experience of being in the Flat Tops. And there have been other folks who've come to me and say, you should send Allison down to this part of the state, or you should put her on a journey where she ends up in another part of the state or some reason or other, go cover this issue or that issue. And to me, she's just so tied. This is where she is kind of just grounded. It's where her home is now. And ultimately, in terms of arc, the big question is, would Allison ever go back to the city? Because that's where she started out. And can she get back to a mental place where she can go back to the city and accept all the random stuff that goes on in the city? And the series is only 5 books in. I don't know if at this point if I'm going back there because things are going well with some of my other writing projects. But ultimately that would be the big character question for Allison, is if she could deal with moving back to the city.
I was going to ask you if Melancholy Howl was the last book in the series. It sounds like that's an indefinite. You're not sure. You just said you're not sure if you're going to revisit it or if the series is over.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't wrap up the Allison arc, and there's some other characters where the arc is not complete. I certainly intended to write a sixth book, and unfortunately, or fortunately, things are going so well with these other projects. So the Fireballer, that idea kind of came out of the blue as a non-crime fiction and just took me a couple of years to write and a couple of years to get out, and getting behind that and making all the improvements until it was published really was a great side journey and away from crime fiction. And then this latest book is supposed to be the start of a new series with an excellent publisher, Thomas and Mercer. And so I can see my next few years. I'm coming down not the home stretch, but I'm about halfway through the sequel to No Lie Lasts Forever. So I feel like my writing time is really going to be committed for the next few years to that new series. So whether I'd love to get back to Allison, but I'm just not sure when or how. So
okay.
a good problem to have.
You've got your hands full. Now you also write short stories. Which Mark is your favorite? Would you say writing short stories or novels?
Definitely the novel form. I think short stories and people who write them are amazing. It's so challenging to come up with a good short story that's 4,000 or 5,000 words, and so much happens in such a short amount of time, and you have to have such a great idea. And I so admire and respect the short story writers out there. That's really something else. I wish I could work on my novels in the morning and maybe work on short stories in the afternoon. That would be great, but I just don't have that many short story ideas. So when they come, they're great, and I try to follow up on them. But yeah, it's all good. Okay.
Please share for our listeners, those particularly who are authors themselves, 3 or 4 steps that you personally found to be effective at getting the word out about your books.
Well, my main point or main tip on this question, which is always such a great conversation, is do what feels natural to you. If everybody says you've got to be on social media and you're not comfortable on social media, you don't have to go on social media. If everybody says you've got to write a newsletter and get it going long before you are even published and you're not comfortable writing a newsletter, I don't think you have to write a newsletter. Yes, I think as an author you have to get out there, and I would encourage every author to push their comfort zone. If you don't think you like going to conferences and giving presentations, try it. Get better at it. You can push yourself a little bit. I do think ultimately really the thing these days is word of mouth. Unfortunately, all the blurbs, the reviews are great and everything else, but you really need to have word of mouth, and I think that is really building your writing community. So even whether it's the quality of writing or the quality of your marketing plan, it's going to come down to having a extensive, as big as you can make it, writing community where you have people advocating for you, pushing for you, who've got your back, are out there saying good things about your book, and they may be the ones online. They may have their social media accounts. But really just getting your community together, and that means participating in the writing community, not as a transactional thing, like if I do this for you, will you do this for me, but just get in there and support other writers, be a genuine friend, be a genuine help if you can. That means maybe reading a book by another writer. You don't know how they might end up being able to advocate for you way down the road when you need it, when your agent drops you or when your publisher drops you and you need to look for another agent or another publisher. you might end up hiring a publicist, as you mentioned earlier, and having a publicist do a lot of work for you, which is perfectly legitimate way to go about it. And then, through that writing community, you're going to find the high-quality publicists who will really do a good, solid job for you and not just take your money and pretend to spend it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So get your writing community. It'll help you with your writing community. Will help you with the quality of the prose on the page, and your writing community will help you celebrate your book and help spread the word when it comes out. And obviously, I would encourage folks to do as many bookstore appearances and Zoom interviews and podcast interviews and anything that they can. It's but keep it real and keep it to what you feel comfortable doing. So, yeah.
Again, that's great advice. As we come to the last few minutes of today's show, can you tell us when you started the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers podcast?
Yeah, I started it in 2015, in May of 2015, and coming up on 395 episodes in, I think, something like
Whoa.
that. Yeah, so just been a real pleasure to interview writers, and the key with the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers podcast is that you've got to be a member of Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers, which is a fabulous organization. We have members from around the country. You have to be either a member of RMFW, or you have to be somebody who's presenting a workshop or presenting at our annual conference, somebody who's going to be participating in the community. And we, like a keynote speaker, might come on and do an interview on the podcast previewing their speech at an upcoming conference. We'll do things like that. But we've had, 390 plus interviews with people who believe in their books and their writing, and sometimes they'll promote a book and we'll talk about their book, or we'll talk about some element of the writing business or marketing, or, we'll have a specific discussion on an element of craft. So it's really been enjoyable and really a lot of fun to put together. Yeah.
Awesome. Where can Off the Shelf listeners get a copy of your books, Mark?
They are available everywhere books are sold. If you head to writermarkstevens.com, there are links all over the place. The Allison Coyle Mystery Series is widely available. Fireballer is widely available. And all the Allison Coyle books are on audio. Fireballer has got a great audio version out there as well.
Okay. Now, do you have any upcoming speaking engagements? You were talking about getting out to bookstores and getting on podcasts and going to writers' conferences, et cetera. Do you have any upcoming engagements that our listeners could support you at?
Well, I definitely am planning, and I've already signed up for Left Coast Crime in March in Denver, which is the second largest crime fiction writing conference in the country after BoucherCon. And BoucherCon next year will be in New Orleans in, I believe, August or September. And other than that, I'm actually winding down the whole push around interviews around the Fireballer, which has been a couple of years, and I so appreciate the opportunity again today to talk about it. But now it's turning, and as soon as we get over the holidays here, it will really be ramping up interviews around No Lie Lasts Forever, which will only be a few months away come January 2025. So right now I'm in between talks. There is a book club I'm going to be speaking at in Denver in February, but right now I can't remember the details right off the top of my head.
Okay. Oh, my goodness. We have had the pleasure of connecting with author Mark Stevens, and he is the host of the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers podcast, which we spoke about, and he served as the president of the Rocky Mountain chapter for Mystery Writers of America. Some of his titles are The Fireballer, Antler Dust, Buried by the Roan, Trapline, Lake of Fire, The Melancholy Howl, and Look Forward in April. Look forward, No Lie Lasts Forever. That is Mark's newest novel coming out, 2025, No Lie Lasts Forever. Mark is online and I encourage you to visit him WriterMarkStevens.com, WriterMarkStevens.com. His last name is spelled with a B. WriterMarkStevens.com. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here with us today. So enjoyed having you here on Off the Shelf, and appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. To our listeners, as I always tell you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are amazing. You're awesome. You are incredible. The day we start to believe that. Go out and create a fabulous day for yourself today. See you back here next Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just mark it on your calendar so you don't miss these awesome storytellers. 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on New York City time that you're going to catch off-the-shelf books. Thank you so much, Mark. I will send you a link to the show when it finishes streaming. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye for now.
Thanks for the great conversation.